with Ms. Marianne Williamson.
Thank you. I guess Doug forgot to read the last line, and that's that I'm a candidate for the nomination for presidency. This is a very sad day in America. And it's interesting when we use the word unspeakable, because the events of yesterday in both El Paso and Dayton are unspeakable. This is a day when, to some extent, we should all be in a deep silence within our hearts, and any words we speak should emerge from that deep place of silence. The words that come up for me have to do with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's that thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven that I want to talk to you about today. Doug mentioned that hell does not exist. In A Course in Miracles, it says that heaven is neither a condition nor a place, it is an awareness of our oneness. And hell is simply that which the ego would make of the present. But the Course in Miracles also says the ego is suspicious at best and vicious at worst. The fact that it's a hallucination does not mean that within this realm it does not kill people. This realm, the realm of the earth, we are on this earth in order to bring forth on earth what is true in heaven. The spiritual understanding of life makes us see and realize not only who we are, but why we are here. Who we are is love, and we are here with a divine purpose, and that purpose is to bring forth on earth as it is in heaven the love that is the ultimate reality of our existence. In both the Christian in both the Christian cross and in the Jewish Star of David, the visual symbol is the intersection between the two poles, that which is horizontal and that which is vertical, that which is of the earth and that which is of the spirit. One of the lines in the Course in Miracles that I most appreciate is where it says that God's will has never not been done. God's will shall prevail. God's love shall prevail. But what is completely left to you and me and the exercise of our free will is how long that will take and how much suffering we have to go through first. So in A Course in Miracles, it says, it is not up to you what you learn. It is merely up to you whether you learn through joy or through pain. Come on, everybody. We have two choices. We can go there now or we can go there later. That 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection, how long those 3 days are is completely up to us. Those 40 years in the desert between slavery in Egypt and the deliverance to the promised land, how long those 40 years are is completely up to us. Now, one of the sentences that was put up on the screen today was, we envision a world that works for everyone. That's it right there. But the point is, it's not enough to just envision it. We have to ask ourselves, is it enough that I simply sit in meditation and envision a world that works for everyone? Or do I not have to go through the deep questioning in my heart, which is, am I doing everything I can, and is my nation doing everything it can to bring forth that vision on earth as it is in heaven? That's where it gets a little hard, right? That's where it gets a little inconvenient, right? That's where we have to put a little dirt under our fingernails. That's when we have to look at ourselves And that's where we have to look at America's foreign policy. Because spiritual darkness, I think we would all agree, that a young man who goes into a Walmart, and let's not kid ourselves. This is moving beyond murder to double homicide, to triple homicide. Then we moved into mass shooting. This yesterday was a massacre. A massacre. We all, as kids, learned about the Boston Massacre. You know how many people were in the Boston Massacre? 12. We would all agree. What spiritual darkness was inside the heart of this young man? And we know more about that spiritual darkness than we wish we did. Because we know what was on his Facebook page. We know the white nationalist screed that was on his Facebook page. We're supposed to sit here today and talk about respect for other nations. He was killing those people, he said, because immigrants were taking over. That was the level of his respect for other nations. But spiritual darkness is to spiritual light just as physical darkness is to physical light. It is not a thing, it is the absence of a thing. You can't fight darkness, you have to turn on the lights. Many of you probably heard me speak at the debates the other night about the dark psychic forces of collectivized hatreds that have been brought forth in this nation. And we in the spiritual and religious communities know something that is extremely relevant to the times in which we live, and which is a necessary understanding in order to adequately address the challenges of the times in which we live. And that is that reason alone cannot stave off evil. The mortal mind alone cannot stave off spiritual darkness. Only love can do that. Now, there are many more people in this country who love than hate. There are many more people in this world who love than hate. The problem here is not that there are more haters than lovers. The problem is that haters are so serious today. The problem is that haters have gotten together today. The problem is that haters have a plan today. The problem is that haters will do anything to effectuate their worldview. The problem is that haters are willing to pick up whatever material means are necessary to effectuate that worldview. And the problem is that haters are being given legitimacy and even passive support by the most powerful person in the world. Now, how do we respond to that? There's a line in the Course in Miracles where it says that miracles arise from conviction. Conviction, what a word. Conviction is a force multiplier. The problem isn't that there are more haters than lovers. The problem is that those who hate today hate with conviction. And the concomitant problem is that those of us who love have not been loving with the level of conviction that is necessary in order to adequately shut down this dangerous force in our midst. Martin Luther King said about Gandhi that he was the first person in human history to take the ethic of love and move it beyond mere personal interaction, that it might be a broad-scale social force for good. The love that will save the world is not simply a love for our own children. The love that will save the world is not simply love for our own tribe. The love that will save the world is a love that is as intense for the children on the other side of town as it is for our own children. The love that will save the world is a love that is as intense for children on the other side of the world as it is for our own children. The love that will save the world is not just a love for our fellow Americans. The love that will save the world is a love that is true and is convicted and real for every sentient being. That is the spiritual calling, and it is the only solution to the political challenges of our day. I heard the Dalai Lama say that a British scientist had said to him that we should think of every other nation as our domestic partner. We share this earth. We share this earth with everyone. Even to realize that, to think that. When you see a line like we've envisioned a world that works well, as Doug said, for everyone, does America's foreign policy, is America's foreign policy based on the notion that our purpose is to help create a world that works well for everyone? Is America's domestic policy, is our tax policy, is our educational policy, is our environmental policy, or our food policies, or almost any of our public policies truly aligned with the goal of creating a world that works well for everyone? And is it enough for us as spiritual seekers to say, it's okay that I don't stand for that because I envision it? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You know, there's so much talk about the divine feminine. There's also a divine masculine. There's also a divine masculine. Divine feminine is you receive it. The divine masculine is you get it done. Divine masculine is you make it happen. The divine masculine is you lay it down on earth as it is in heaven. Heaven is the awareness of our oneness, that we receive it, that we open our hearts to it. But really, is that all that God wants? Is that all that God is asking us for? That is the question that each of us must ask for ourselves. Because this country is now plagued by darkness for one reason only, ladies and gentlemen, and that is that this country is not currently dedicated to light. This country is plagued by fear because we are not consciously and proactively dedicated to love. Our public policy is neutral. It is morally neutral. And it is a spiritual principle that there is no such thing as a neutral thought. Every thought you think, the Course in Miracles says, leads straight to heaven or straight to hell. Hell being not the place, as Doug was saying, but a condition. I'll tell you what hell is. What happened at the Walmart in El Paso yesterday, that's hell. I'll tell you what the crucifixion is. What happened in Dayton last night. That is the meaning of hell. That is the meaning of the crucifixion. That is the meaning of a force, and it exists. It exists within all of us. That force which would deny love. That force which would make us separate from each other. And that force which would anyway lead us, however subtly or insidiously, to be distracted from the point which is our function on this earth. The issue is not just to know who we are, but the issue is in the space of that knowing to then receive instruction, to receive guidance, to receive direction. Every citizen, every person, a citizen is like an immune cell in a society. So much of what has happened, so many of the forces of darkness, the forces of racism, the forces of bigotry, the forces of anti-Semitism, the forces of homophobia, the forces of Islamophobia, the forces of xenophobia. You put all those together, that's a collectivized hatred. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been historically, and it is when it is present in a system today, one of the most dangerous, most evil manifestations ever to confront the human race. The people who are from the higher consciousness, religious, spiritual, and New Thoughts movements should be the biggest grown-ups in the room. We should not be standing on the sidelines. We should not be going into this kind of collective ditziness because we know you cannot truly understand the power of love without insight into the power of lovelessness. It is the people who come from the religious and spiritual communities who have so much to offer now. Why? Because we understand that evil exists. That is what's so wrong with the current political mindset in America. It is so based on this understanding that thinks of itself as so sophisticated, and it is so unsophisticated. Because if you don't have a clue as to what goes on inside the heart of that young man yesterday, then you don't have a clue what will repair the world, because you don't really have a clue what's wrong with the world. What's wrong with the world? What's wrong with the world is where the mind goes when love is not present. Now, we know that this is very multidimensional. And there are people, by the way, who do a lot of work on criminal justice and criminology. We have actually done so many studies. You can look at all the people who have become violent criminals who are in our prisons, and we know about the abuse so many times that they experience as children. We know so many times about the family structure. We know about the lack of mental health. We know about all of these things. It's not like we don't know. We are not living at a time where we all need to wake up and know. You know what? We know. At this point, that's not where we are in our psychological collective journey. This is not a moment where we really need to know. No, we know. We need to now own what we know and act on what we know. Any child who is not cared for, that's going to be a potential problem several years from now. Any child that is not educated, any child that is not fed, any community that is not given a chance to thrive, any human being who is kept in an economic social condition in which there is constant chronic debilitation, a constant anxiety, constant tension, you can bet your dollar there will be an inevitable societal dysfunction that arises from that. We should see large groups of desperate people as a national security risk. National security risk, whether it is in a corner of a US city or a corner of the world. Where do you think Hitler emerged from? Where do you think any mass movement of real darkness and dysfunction emerges from except the presence of enough human despair to make desperate people do desperate things? It is not some kind of fuzzy-hearted liberalism to help people. It's the only smart thing to do. And so if we're to take seriously that we are on this earth for a purpose, then we must understand that we need to turn our lives around sometimes. And that means we need to turn our collective experience around too. And that's all that politics should be. I have been saying for years, many of you know my work, know my book, Healing the Soul of America, know my work with the Sister Giant conferences, know my work with my last book, The Politics of Love. This is not something that is new in my communication with the public. I've been talking for a very long time about how I have been very frustrated with the New Thought and Higher Consciousness movement for its chronic political disengagement. I'll tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, there is no serious religious or spiritual path that has ever existed or exists now that gives any of us a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. And while this appears to be news to some people, I do have to remind you, Jesus didn't come to earth with the message, love yourself. It's love each other. Yeah, you have to love yourself, but one of the best ways you can come to love yourself is when you can go to bed at night knowing that you can have some self-respect. Why? Because you helped someone else. Because you loved someone else. Because someone else's life is going to be a little bit better today because you interacted with it. You can't love yourself if you look in the mirror and you're not quite sure what you're supposed to love. It's not enough that God created you as love. The issue is, what are you going to do about it? I remember seeing some graffiti once that said, to do is to be, Schopenhauer. To be is to do, Sartre. Do, Sinatra. Do, be, do. First, we do the being part. You wake up in the morning. You wake up in the morning and you fortify yourself. You ground yourself. You ground yourself in that which is eternally true. Just like you take a shower, you brush your teeth, you prepare your body. You don't want to go out into the day with yesterday's dirt on your body. But the same is true with meditation and prayer and reflection in the morning. If you just wake up in the morning and don't pray, don't meditate, don't ground yourself in those things which are eternally true, and just walk off into the world, then there's no surprise if you're depressed by noon. You have to purify your heart the same way you purify your body. And that's what meditation does. That's what prayer is. As you solidify your alignment with the vertical in order to perform best within the horizontal. Because our lives are to be dedicated to the intersection. Whether it is a Christian with the cross on their heart, or a Jew with the Star of David, or any other great religious system. The whole point is, may I be grounded in those things which are eternally true in order that I might bring forth on the temporal level those things which are contemporaneously true. And that is how we should see politics. That is how we should see society. That we are collectively existing, just like we are individually existing, in order to bring forth the good and the true and the beautiful. Instead, our society and our politics has become so morally neutral, and neutrality does not exist. There is no such thing as a neutral thought. All energy goes somewhere. All energy, that is how mental energy operates, whether it is collectively applied or individually. It will either serve the light or it will serve the darkness. Bob Dylan had a song, you might serve the devil, you might serve the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. When I was young, we had a saying, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so it's not like when you look at something like our economic policies or our international policies, people might say, oh, but those policies were never brought forth in order to intentionally hurt anyone. That's not good enough. Amoral always leads to immoral consequences. So our economic policy did not start out being immoral, it just started out being amoral. Same with our foreign policy. It did not start out with anyone seeking to be immoral, it just starts out being immoral. That's why, for instance, we can have, for the sake of a $350 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia, our country, and this would just make our grandparents roll over in their graves. Our country, for the sake of a $350 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia, is even now giving aerial support to a genocidal war by which Saudi Arabia is killing. This is starving tens of thousands of people, many of them children. Now, there has been a bipartisan effort in Congress to stop this, but the president overrode it. Now, when our Secretary of State was asked, how can we do this? His response was telling. His response was, we can have strategic partnerships with people who do not share our values. You know what that means, ladies and gentlemen? It means we have no values. We can talk all day about how America has values, but when you are willing, for the sake of $350 billion, sell arms that will be used to prosecute a genocidal war, you have no values. It's over. You are spiritually gone. Because if you're not standing for the light, you are conspiring with the darkness. And that is as true of a nation as it is true of an individual. Now, I believe in transformation. I believe in the radical powers of transformation. I believe that when we admit our character defects, when we are willing to admit before God and other human beings the exact nature of our wrongs, I believe in redemption. I believe in moral redemption. I believe in moral redemption for an individual, and I believe in moral redemption for a nation. I believe that it's possible, not only because of what I've witnessed in other people's lives, but because I've witnessed in my own. What happens when you're willing to get honest with yourself? When you're willing to say, have I really been the person I say I am? Have I really been acting in accordance with the principles on which I purport to stand? Where is the gap between what I say I believe in and how I just behaved? And where there is a gap, I can atone. That's why Catholics go to confession. That's why Jews on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, is the day of Yom Kippur. That is why in Alcoholics Anonymous, you have to take a fearless moral inventory. You have to admit the exact nature of your character defects. And when you do, and when you are willing to atone, and you are willing to make amends, you know, in the Jewish religion, for any of you who have never been to a Yom Kippur service, many years ago, it was the high holy day of Yom Kippur. I had just moved to Santa Barbara, California. I did not have a synagogue. I looked around, I said to my friends, where do I go? Where do I go? I don't even know of a synagogue. The only synagogue that anyone could tell me about was an Orthodox synagogue in Santa Barbara. And I was not raised Orthodox, so it was an environment that was somewhat different for me. The women on one side, the men on another side, the whole thing was rather different for me. But there were many things about that service which was very, very powerful. And one of the things that was so powerful that I'd never experienced before in my entire life was the shift in energy in the room when they blew the shofar. Now, we all know about chanting. We all know about meditation, about mantras. The blowing of the shofar on the day of Yom Kippur, the blowing of the ram's horn, this is what I experienced that day. Now, I had experienced it really every year of my life, but I never experienced it like I experienced it that day, because I stayed the entire day. I was in that prayer the entire day. And the whole day of Yom Kippur is about atoning and confessing one's sins to God. Sin, as Doug was saying, not in the sense that you did something wrong, but that you made a mistake that God doesn't want to punish you for, but that he wants to correct. But you must admit. And all that day, I had that experience. I was in it. The experience of prayerfulness and the power of the spirituality and the genuine religious fervor was so intense in that synagogue that I was there. I was really there with the atonement for my own errors and so forth. Being in that room that day, by the time they blew the shofar, and when they blow the shofar, it means you have admitted your sins, you have atoned before God, and God shall give you another year in the book of life. What that means is there's a cosmic reset. You know, Buddha came before Jesus. Buddha said action, reaction, action, reaction. Jesus said, yes, but in a moment of grace, the karma is burned. Yes, everything you do that's not loving, it's going to have a consequence. But when you atone for it, it is wiped clean and you can start again. And when they blew the shofar that day, I got it. Something changed in me. The molecules, the molecular structure of myself, of my nervous system changed. And I knew it. Something had been washed clean in me. In the Course in Miracles, it says miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love, but miracles do not occur naturally from kind of, sort of love. Miracles do not occur naturally from, well, when it's convenient love. Miracles do not occur naturally in a nation which is not facing all the places where our own policies are so loveless. You cannot say, we are going to have millions of American children go to school every single day in schools that don't even have the school supplies with which to teach a child to read, knowing that if a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically diminished and the chances of incarceration are increased. You cannot have a nation which allows millions of American children to go to school every single day hungry, in the richest nation in the world, asking the teacher, do you maybe have any food for me to eat? You cannot have children such as here in Las Vegas, elementary school students on suicide watch, and the principal of the school calling the district to say, we have children who are in chronic trauma here. I really need you to send one of those social workers over here. And the school district says, we'd love to, but yours is not one of the worst cases, so we can't. You cannot have a nation that is willing to sell arms, 350 billion, and then look away because it's a strategic partnership while we're giving aerial support to a genocidal war. We cannot be a nation that has public policy after public policy after public policy that makes it easier for those who already have so much to have more. It makes it harder for people who don't have anything to even thrive. You cannot do that and then say to God, please give us a miracle, we're in trouble here. But if we are willing to be honest, and we are willing to be real, and we are willing to look at a policy and say, well, that's real racial disparity in our criminal sentencing there, we must fix that. If we are willing to say, there are 43 million Americans who are food insecure in America, we must fix that. If we are willing to look at tax policies and say, well, that serves the very, very, very rich, but it makes it harder for everybody else, we must be willing to fix that. When we see the places in our foreign policy that do not stand for democracy, that do not stand for humanitarian values, but which, like too many of our domestic policies, just stand for advocacy for short-term profit maximization for huge corporate entities, because those huge corporate entities are paying the corporate donors to all of the legislative elected officials who actually are doing what they're doing for no other reason than the money is coming in from those corporate donors. If we are willing as a nation to say, that's wrong, and we must fix that, then America will have a miracle. America will have a miracle the same way individuals have miracles, when we're willing to get real, and we're willing to get honest, and we're willing to stop pretending, and we're willing to do the often difficult, psychologically and emotionally difficult work of looking in the mirror and saying, wow, that has nothing to do with being good. It has to do with a few people making money. That does not have to do with democracy. That does not have to do with moral values. That does not have to do with being the people that God would have us be. It has nothing to do with love. It has to do with economic values that are amoral, that have nothing to do with people, that actually are executed at the expense of people, at the expense of our people, at the expense of people of the world, and at the expense of the planet on which we live. Ladies and gentlemen, God himself will not protect us from the law of cause and effect. Law of cause and effect, the Course in Miracles tells us, was instituted for our protection. God will not save us from the consequences of our actions as individuals. God will not save us from the consequences of our actions as a nation. But the moment we're willing to get real, the moment we're willing to stand naked before God, as Doug said, however you perceive it. There was an article today in the Washington Post comparing the philosophy of Donald Trump to the philosophy of Marianne Williamson, and talking about Donald Trump's belief in certain things compared to New Thought. It's pretty fascinating. But what they got wrong, what they got seriously wrong, was the idea that we believe in a higher power. And that higher power is love. I'm not like Donald Trump, where I feel like I can do it and only I can do it. Yes, I said, compared to other candidates running, I'm having a conversation that alone can lift us up. But not that I'm the only person who can do it. I'm just the only person who happens to be running for president who is having that conversation. But I'll tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not saying I can do it. This is not about what we can do. It's about what a higher power than us can do. And that is what we need now. There is no mortal power that alone can deal with the force of white nationalistic rage and fervor that has been unleashed in this country. There is no reason for us to believe that it's going to stop anytime soon. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to talk about respect for other nations. Can't have respect for other nations without realizing that those other nations include Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. We must have respect for the pain and the suffering that so many of the people in those countries have gone through, that would lead them to actually walk across a desert with their own children in their arms, seeking asylum in the United States. We must recognize that our heartlessness to turn these people away, when the great tradition of the United States is to have an open heart, is to realize that this country, God did not give us some special power. The reason the United States has been blessed is because we have been willing to be a blessing. Asylum is not a crime. Asylum is a statutory right. I'm not worried about the closing of our borders so much as I'm worried about the closing of our hearts. And so we need to start over. We need to start over as a nation, just like sometimes we need to start over as individuals. I know in my life, it's not like I ever had to face darkness in myself and had to realize, wow, Marianne, everything you are has been wrong and everything you've done has been wrong. No, 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 no. That is not what the moments of growth have been for me in my life. It's been, yes, Marianne, you get it right there. Yes, Marianne, you get it right there. Yes, Marianne, you did it right there. But right here, you must look at this because you must change. And that's how I feel about the United States. We are good people. We are decent people. I'm not saying we're better than other people, but we're good and we're decent people. But when I read an interview where Jared Kushner said to his father-in-law a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, there are a lot of angry people out there. We can harness all that anger and make you president. I thought to myself, there's so many good people out there. There's so many decent people out there. There's so many dignified people out there. There's so many loving people out there. We can harness all that and change the world. And I believe it today. We can take all that goodness. Where some people have collectivized hatred, we must collectivize love. And when we do that, ladies and gentlemen, and we get serious about that, and we do more than envision it, we do it. We will do more than, it's not like we will do more, but yes, we will change the world. But on our way to helping change the world, we will change America. Thank you very much.